edition of the SBL Business Law Weekly, which essentially is an hour-long launch hour session where we discuss one trending issue of the law. This week's version or edition or episode of the Business Law Weekly is brought to you by the Mining Law Committee of the NBA section on business law. So we have what essentially is a very interesting topic today. We also have a very seasoned panel to guide us and navigate through this topic: policy developments in Nigeria's mining sector, a review of the federal government's 7-point agenda. What we are hoping this session will do for you is, for those who are lawyers, you're interested in mining law, you want to start up in that area, this session would help to pinpoint to you where the government is headed, and so that way you know how to design your strategy, what extra learning you have to get, how you want to market yourself to potential clients in the mining space. I can see the room is quickly filling up, so we'll give just a minute to let more people come in before we get the show properly on the road. But I want to assure you that all our speakers are already here in the room. They are all fired up and ready to go as well. So we'll just give 1 more minute. We'll start exactly by 2 minutes past 2 p.m. with an opening remarks by the chair of the Mining Law Committee. And then just to let you know as well, if you have any questions while the session is going on, you don't have to wait until the end of the session. Just put them up in the Q&A box. We have an allotted time for our speakers to address those questions, but as your questions come up, particularly they align with what we are discussing, then we'll midstream allow our speakers speak to your questions. So please feel free at any point in time to drop your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll take them as well. Then, of course, we would, in addition to the panel discussion, as mentioned, we have set out 10 minutes towards the end of the session to take your questions. We assure you as well, this is SBL Business Law Weekly. We keep to time, so 2 to 3 p.m. By 3 p.m., we'll be wrapping this up so you can get back to work. But we appreciate your taking out time to spend your lunch hour with us this afternoon. So now it's 2 minutes past 2 p.m. We are getting the show on the road immediately. So I'll be calling, first of all, for our opening remarks, the chair of the SBL Mining Law Committee, Jumoke Fajemirokun, a partner at ENR Advisory. So Jumoke, over to you for your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Max has already introduced me. I'm Jumoke Fajemirokun. I'm a partner at ENR Advisory, and I also chair the Mining Law Committee of the NBA section on business law. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode of SBL Business Law Weekly, and it's being hosted by the Mining Law Committee. Today, we'll be discussing recent policy developments in the mining space, and the focus of today's discussion will be on the 7-point agenda that was recently unveiled by the Honorable Minister of Solid Minerals Development. It's officially referred to as the Agenda for Transformation of the Solid Minerals Sector for International Competitiveness and Domestic Prosperity. As many of you will know, Nigeria is richly endowed with abundant mineral resources, and the sector holds immense potential for economic growth and diversification. It's been recognized as a pillar upon which the nation can truly industrialize. However, sound policies are necessary to encourage the investment required and also to ensure sustainable development. So today we have a panel of very distinguished speakers that have experience across mining policy, mining law, and exploration and mining operations, and they will interrogate this policy agenda in detail and the extent to which it can support the sector growth that we require. So I'm looking forward to the perspectives and insights that they will bring to this topic, hoping that overall, the outcome of the discussion will form a base upon which the NBA-SBL can continue to build its advocacy efforts in the sector. So at this point, I'll turn back to Max, who will be moderating the session. He'll introduce the speakers, and then they'll carry on with the discussion. And I wish you all a very enjoyable session. It will be interactive, and I assure you that you'll find it interesting and engaging. As Max has already guided, you can drop in your questions as the session goes along, and there'll be time for question and answer at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for that very succinct opening remarks. And Chair was spot on time and kept exactly to our time. So I think that has set a good tone for this discussion that everyone would be on time. Thanks so much, Chair. But there's a chair greater than my chair who is in the room, and I have no option but to at least recognize him and just ask him. I know he would object to this, but to ask him to at least say hello to us. So the chair of the NBA section on business law is in the room. He's actually been in the room along with the early birds. So Dr. Adeoye Adefulu would just like to hear hello from you before we move on with the conversation.
Hello.
We want more, Oliver Twist, Chair. We want to hear more.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, and thank you, Max, and thank you to Jumoke and the members of the committee, of the Mining Law Committee. Thank you for all the good work, and thank you for assembling a great panel like this to discuss what I think is a really important topic. Everybody's always talked about the dawn of the mining sector, and somehow that dawn we've not seemed to have achieved it yet. Hopefully, this new policy, and forgive me, I can't remember the long name of the policy, just the 7-point agenda. Hopefully, this will bring about that much needed dawn of the mining sector so that it can contribute to the wider Nigerian economy. So I look forward to the discussions, and I wish us all a successful deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair of the NBA-SBL, for that very brief welcome remarks as well. So as we get ready to get the show on the road, I'll just quickly introduce our very stellar panel of speakers this afternoon. I mean, if you are by any chance have been a follower of the mining law community in Nigeria, then you would not find surprising the panel we have who is on this call or who has any interest at all in mining law would know Prof. Prof really is the rock on which, this mining law committee is really built. And that is why he's called Professor Peter Akpe, senior inaugural chair of the NBA-SBL Mining Law Committee. And really, Prof is, really not just the rock of this committee, but also the rock on which the mining law community in Nigeria as a whole is built. I mean, he was one of the first who began to talk about mining law. I remember the first time I ever came in contact with this committee was, I believe, at the SBL 2017 at Echo Hotels in Lagos. It was a breakout session, and I was wondering what lawyers have to do with mining law. But somehow my curiosity got the better of me, and I'm so glad I didn't resist that temptation to join that panel. And ever since then, I've been a member of the committee, and it really has opened up to me a whole new era of practice. So welcome with me, Professor Peter Akpe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Of course, he's a research professor at the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Now we move to our next speaker this afternoon. Prof, please, welcome.
Thank you, Max, for the generous introduction. Yeah, thank you.
Prof, you're welcome. I mean, I've understated it, Prof, but you're welcome. We move to our next speaker. Now, if Prof is the rock on which Nigerian mining law community is built, then our next speaker is actually a huge deposit of precious gemstones that the committee chanced upon and has always continued to give. Lumun Amanda Fisi has always been such a wonderful partner to the committee. That first meeting I told you that attracted me to the mining law committee, she spoke at that session, and every time we have called upon her, she's always been there to give us value. So that is why I refer to her as a huge proven deposit of commercial quantity, of gemstones. And of course, you would not be disappointed when you hear her speak. She has such a passion for, for the industry, and she's been such a strong voice on so many fronts for the industry at the NESG, working with a Mine Diver, a project in the Ministry of the old Ministry of Mines and Steel Development. Of course, you would update us on where that stands at the moment as well. I mean, she's such a strong voice, and we expect to get some very useful insights from her this afternoon. And last but by no means the least, we have our speaker as well, the last speaker, Tim Tokun, who is the managing partner of Motemose Metals. He'll tell us more about that. This may be the first time we're having Tim on one of our programs, but Tim, just be aware that the committee has an exploration license on you. So we are watching you. If you prove yourself, then just be sure we are going to get a mining license on you, and we'll keep calling on you like we have done with Amanda. And we trust that before the meeting is over, my chair would have given us permission to reach out to convert our exploration license we have on you to a mining list, so we can continue to draw from your wealth of knowledge. But Motemose Metals is a global multidisciplinary geomining consultancy company. Tim is an ever-evolving mineral resource professional that has over the past 17 years participated in global pipeline of development and production projects across 14 countries on 3 continents, and in capacity spanning field roles to executive management. He has worked with publicly listed, privately held, and vertically integrated companies, as well as local and national government. So, Mr. Tim, welcome to the panel and to this committee this afternoon. Can we just see your face, Mr. Tim? I don't think I've seen your face here this afternoon. If you could just say hi to us before we delve into the first.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Max.
Yeah, thank you. So good to have you.
Good to be here.
Thank you. So without further ado, we'll just jump right into the discussion this afternoon. The chair of the committee had already given us a quick overview of what we are discussing. Essentially, it's taken out of a speech granted by the Honorable Minister of Solid Minerals, Oladile Alake, on the 2nd of September 2023. He titled the speech "The Agenda for Transformation of the Solid Minerals Sector for International Competitiveness and Domestic Prosperity." He highlighted 7 points, which essentially is what we are calling the 7-point agenda for the sector. So I want to start with one of the items that the minister mentioned, and Prof, this will be coming straight to you. So the first item mentioned by the minister on his agenda was the creation of the Nigerian Solid Minerals Corporation. But the question is, we have gone this route before in oil and gas. We had the NNPC. So, Prof, what do you think are the lessons we can learn from the NNPC era, and how do you think we can make this Nigerian Solid Minerals Corporation work?
Thank you very much for the question. Having a Solid Minerals Corporation is indeed not a new development as such. We've had it before. In form of the Nigerian Mining Corporation that existed before, that has now gone comatose. So we had such a company existing in the mining sector before now. Why they are talking about having a new one is perhaps because it has become comatose and has not been able to discharge the responsibilities for which it was established in the first place. And now, the oil sector also started very much the way the mining sector had started, by having preponderance of state-owned enterprises leading the development of the sector. So you have the NNPC, which in the mining sector, perhaps the Nigerian Mining Corporation was exactly what you can say is a replica of the NNPC. But over time, the lessons have our experiences have shown that maybe government should not be leading in the development, the public sector should not lead in the development of these extractive sectors. And perhaps that is why there's been a transformation of the NNPC from a state-owned enterprise, as we knew it to be, to a limited liability company, or a private company, more or less now. So maybe if we are to learn any lessons from what has happened in the oil and gas sector, then perhaps maybe we should be thinking of having a private or a limited liability company that will drive the government's investment in the solid mineral sector, rather than having a state-owned corporation again, because we already had one that existed. I'm not aware that the Nigerian Mining Corporation Act has been repealed. So it means that on our paper or in our law books, we still have the Nigerian Mining Corporation. So why establish another one? But it would be fine if we learn from the lessons of the oil and gas sector to now have a private limited liability company lead the development or the investment of government in this sector, like what has been done in some other jurisdictions. Indeed, what has always been shown is the example of Saudi Arabia, where the state-owned enterprise has actually transformed more or less in that direction and has now become quoted on the stock exchange. That's Midan. And so perhaps maybe that's what Nigeria should be looking out to have something like that, that we be eventually quoted on the stock exchange where investments in the sector can actually be channeled. I think that's where the lessons I think we can learn from the oil and gas sector.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yeah, and you know that's a very valuable lesson, because if we have come through this route before, then definitely we should learn from the lessons that are already available to us. So I'll move on to Amanda. And Amanda, the third item on the agenda talks about employing big data and technology to scale up investments in the sector, particularly big data on what it terms the 7 priority minerals. So while also in the same breath, the 7th item focuses on mineral processing and ensuring that there's value addition. In fact, there's a statement attributed to the minister saying that licenses will no longer be issued to miners who do not display capacity to also process what they mine. What are your thoughts about these 2 issues, big data and also value addition before, there's a grant of mining titles? So we can't hear you yet, Amanda.
Sorry about that. I got lost in the question. So on big data, seven, because it's been appearing in statements here and there by different ministers, but it was first made official in the roadmap, because that's the only document that we can probably hold on to where it barite, limestone, iron ore, coal, and I think bitumen. I can't remember the last one now. But why? So what the minister's done is commendable, because since we've had those minerals designated as strategic, nothing concrete has been done by way of policy to develop any of those minerals. Yes, there's been work here and there on maybe gold, and then bitumen. Government wants to conduct a bidding round, but there's been no concrete plan of action, in place. Now, but the thing is, I think looking at other countries, right, where there's this issue of designation of the minerals that are strategic, but the general term is actually criticality, minerals that are critical to a country's economy. There is a whole policy and legal framework around that. So several countries didn't have that, but within the last 2 years or so, they've started to enact legislation and policy. So I'll give 2 examples. And these countries include, and regions include, US. They have a critical minerals framework. The Canada, Australia, the EU, and the UK. I think Japan even has. Japan is the odd one out. It's not a mining country, and China. So this framework determines it's country specific in terms of what is critical to a country's economy. So it would differ by countries, but generally for most of these countries, it's really about the minerals that are critical to them are their the energy transition minerals and the technology minerals used in the technology transition. So what this framework does is, the framework is a process and a policy around the designation of these minerals as critical. And then the whole process around exploration, mining, the whole value chain, right up to transport, to recycling, and then how it meets the needs of their domestic industries, and then the global energy transition. So whatever they're exporting from their countries to support the global agenda on energy transition. And then the issue of lists of, we have 7. I think the EU has identified 32. China probably has over 100. And this list changes every few years, maybe every 2 years. So there's a link between their geological survey agency and their industries. In fact, in the US, it is considered, it's under their Defense Act. So their critical minerals are considered, a national security issue, because, their entire tech sector and their green energy transition sector is based on minerals, some of which they do not have in the US, and they have to import. So they have to consider issues around geopolitics. So if you look at these geopolitical issues, tensions between China and the US, it's also around the access to these minerals, by the US, because they look at it as a national security, that if there is no mineral for their defense sector and tech sector, there might be a civil unrest. So back to Nigeria, what do we need? I think we need to have a critical minerals framework. And the minerals that are going to be critical to us are not what is critical to the West. We have an infrastructure deficit. So we need a whole suite of minerals that would contribute to building infrastructure, in that list. We have minerals for our manufacturing sector. Then we also have to have minerals there that are critical to our own domestic energy transition. So we need a policy around that. And in support of that, also, we need to build our own exploration industry, and then build our own junior mining explorers, build their capacity so that they also participate in that entire process, and then link the mining industry with the Ministry of Industries, Trade and Investment, so that, and particularly, the Nigerian Geological Survey Agency would be important to upgrade it into a research institute, where it is then doing that, entire analysis, of doing an assessment together with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, to determine what minerals are critical to Nigeria and strategic to Nigeria's infrastructural, industrial development, and energy transitional development. That should be a continuous research process, and then a framework on how to then integrate those minerals into our economy. And then the second issue you talked about was more or less like a ban on the export of minerals, or putting conditionalities for mineral title holders. I don't know if that is for new mineral title holders, or if it applies to existing mineral title holders. So that's something we'll also need to find out. It's also commendable, and you can't blame.
Sorry, Amanda, just to add that the very text of the minister's speech seemed to have indicated that would apply to new titles. That before grant of new titles, they will put that conditionality that you must also be ready to process, otherwise you do not get a grant.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, it's commendable, and you cannot blame the minister. Several other developing countries in Africa and even Indonesia have also, so there's, that rise in this clamor for, export bans. I'll put it like that: export ban of minerals that are unprocessed out of the country, because despite African countries and even developing countries having an abundance of minerals, we have not seen the impact of, having those minerals on our economy. So there's this urgent rush by companies. So all these international companies, they're also paying attention, so it's like, it's a moving train, in different countries. But the issue is, we need to be a bit more practical. There are several restrictions. There are international trade and investment treaties and agreements that restrict our ability to impose that kind of restriction on certain countries, companies from certain of those countries. And then, we have to also consider the W Trade Organization restrictions also on some of those kind of policies. So several countries have tried it, but they haven't been as successful. Ultimately, what it does is that it might affect investments. So if we're trying to attract investments, we might be shooting ourselves in the foot. Tanzania, for instance, they have one of the largest copper mines or so in the world, and they've been negotiating with the potential investor, but that's stalled because of this kind of restriction. And Indonesia tried it as well. They've had some success, maybe a few processing, but they've not achieved it to the level that they would have loved to. So the African Mining Vision, which is the continental policy framework for Africa, actually proposes certain guidelines for African countries to build their downstream. And it requires an integration of the ministries of mines with the ministries of industry, trade, and investment, and an integration of mineral policies, trade policies, and investment policies. And in fact, educational policies, R&D, research, development, and innovation. So just to close, in Nasarawa State, I would really like to commend the government of the Nasarawa State Administration for what they've done. The Investment Promotion Commission or Council or Center has laid out incentives and a framework to encourage mineral processors to invest in mineral processing industry. So that's why I think it would be good if the Ministry of Solid Minerals took a cue from what Nasarawa has done. So because miners are not processors, they are different categories. They're in totally different businesses. Though there's some part of processing associated with mining, but the kind of processing we're talking about is a separate frame, is a separate business itself. So we need to develop a framework, working again, the Ministry of Solid Minerals with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, and then with state government, design an incentive program to attract more investments into processing. And we don't have to start with large processing companies, but we can, make it as an SME. In Nasarawa, I think it's a Chinese consortium. I don't know how big they are. I can't remember the quantities of lithium that they are focused on. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Indeed, you are right. The minister was there to commission that lithium processing factory set up by the Chinese. So let me move over to Tim. So Tim, we want to stay a little bit with the issue of big data, since you are an industry player, and of course you do some level of consulting work, and you've done that across many continents. Just how important is the issue of scaling up? Is the issue of data to scaling up investments in the sector? Then I would also want you at the same time to give your perspectives on item 2 on the agenda, which focuses on creating joint ventures, because part of what the minister mentioned is that when the mining corporation is set up, they would pursue setting up joint ventures with mining multinational companies. I mean, of course, we also have lessons on JVs with the NNPC in that area as well. So how feasible are these aspirations? And what do you think needs to be done to really make it work, to get data that is able to scale up investments and secure viable JV partnerships?
Thank you, Max. There's a forefront discussion in Nigeria all the time regarding processing and beneficiation. And I tell you that unfortunately, that is akin to putting the cart before the horse, because in this business, you have to first fix first principles. And first principles here is the generation of geological, geochemical, geophysical, metallurgical, resource compliant data. Without these lots, you cannot build a jurisdiction, unfortunately. Processing and beneficiation come way down the pecking order. So first things first. And that is why Guinea knows that they have 30 million ounces of gold in their reserves. Why Burkina Faso knows they have 6 million ounces of gold in their reserves. Cote d'Ivoire, 30 million ounces. Senegal, West, Mali, Central, 90-something million ounces. Ghana, 230 million ounces. You have to have this empirical information, but you cannot have it until you've done the real work. And that just still takes us back to where we should be as still a jurisdiction that wants to be in the exploration space for now. We're not yet a mining jurisdiction. Mining jurisdiction means you're actually a net producer of several metals on a monthly basis, on an annual basis. All we can report in Nigeria to date in the compliant fashion is two explorations, 1 million ounce project. Everything else is artisanal estimates, which is largely embarrassing. So big data, as they like to call it, is critical. It is the bedrock, is the first principles of the business before anything else can be built upon it. As regards multinational JVs, well, traditionally that's how the business works. You know, it's not an African phenomenon, it's a global thing. You have Japanese companies mining graphite in China. You have American companies mining lithium in Chile. You have Australian companies backed by Saudi money mining lithium in Austria. The list is endless. So that is typically how it goes. However, you know, big companies don't take punts on greenfields. You must understand that. They are also very country agnostic. So as far as they're concerned, they go to where there's a resource potential. And where's the resource potential, they jump in there and develop it. It doesn't matter, it could be in Bahia, Brazil, or it could be in, you know, Kefi, Nasarawa State. It doesn't matter. So the competition is fierce, which means you have to be at the table, showing them that you have enough in your own locker to justify their investments. As things stand in Nigeria's landscape today for this business, not much of those guys will be coming on board because a lot of things still not together. A lot of community discord within communities, host communities, a lot of unstreamlined licensing processes. All these things have to be cleaned up before these guys can come on board, because they do come on board in a very significant way. They come on board with a lot of investment. So to have that come in, the environment has to be completely enabling. So that's how I'd respond to what you asked of me just now.
Thank you very much for that very enlightening answer. And I think you've touched on some of the other things we are still going to come to, and that was really important as well. So, Prof, I'll come back to you, because one of the strong points that stands out from the minister's speech, you know, was when he used quite strong language to address the issue of what he termed illegal miners in item 4 of the agenda. Then also in item 5, he mentions creating a mines police and some sort of surveillance network. What do you think about the semantics of the minister, particularly on this issue of illegal miners? You know, is the way the term used a little too broad? And are there nuances to that term that we should consider to be able to really tackle it in a fruitful way for all parties concerned?
Well, thank you very much. I think every miner or every observer of the mining field would perhaps share in the minister's sentiment that there's need to curb illegal mining activities, because really illegal mining activities create a distortion. You cannot have a system where people are mining under license and are made to comply with all the requirements to get a license, which sometimes are quite capital intensive. And then you have another group of miners carrying on activities without complying with the requirements of the laws. So it creates this disorderly mining environment. And if we are actually talking about attracting mining majors into our jurisdiction, having preponderance of illegal mining activity is certainly a disincentive to such investors, because they will probably just find that our environment is not that conducive for them to operate in. So I share the minister's worry that we need to get rid of illegal mining activities. But again, in this, we look at it from whom we really call informal miners, who engage in this activity more or less to make a living. And those miners, they are the ones that over time, including our mining policy and our mining initiative have been to encourage them to formalize their activities, so that our formalization drive has been targeted at those group of miners who, for want of resources, are unable to bring their operations within the formal sector. And so you help them, you organize them into cooperatives, you pull them together, and then you're able to provide some incentives and institutional support for them. If those ones are not the ones that you will call illegal, because once you call them illegal miners, there's already a negative toga associated with that. And why would you want to help somebody who is operating illegally? So that is it. But you also have another class of miners who are not exactly, their activities are not poverty reduction activities, or they are not people that you think they're just trying to make a living for themselves. They're people who really can comply with the requirements of the law, but they do not want to do so. And therefore, they engage in mining activities without license. Those, I perhaps believe that those are the ones that the minister is targeting. And those are the ones that we should actually ensure that we do not allow them to operate in our environment, so to speak. And so we've had instances across the country where it is reported where some foreigners, in collusion with local people, engage in mining activities. And indeed, because they do not pass through a licensing process, whatever is won by them is often taken and smuggled out of the country. So we don't even have record of what has been mined in the country. Secondly, what is supposed to go to government by way of tax revenues or royalty, as the case may be, is lost. So when you look at it from a policy perspective, no minister will want to condone that kind of activity. So in my respectful view, I believe that that's what the minister was hampering on. Now, how do we deal with this phenomenon? And over the what had started in Nigeria as the stagnation of the mining industry caused a lot of distortions for us, both in terms of some of these institutional arrangements that were in place. We were aware of the existence, or we are aware of the existence of the mine police, for instance, whose activity was to work with the mines inspectorate to police the minefields to ensure that there's no illegal activities or disorderly mining activities taking place in the various minefields across the country. But when the sector suffered decline or stagnation, if you like, the mine police was no longer there or active as it should be. Now that the minister is talking about creating a surveillance system, we believe that maybe one of the things would be to strengthen the mines police. The former minister also made policy pronouncement towards ensuring that the mine police is strengthened and to be able to do this. It is not just a case of making a policy pronouncement. There must be some degree of dedication of resources to that effect. Now, how do you want to do it? In those days when we were not leveraging technology, you had the mine police on horseback going around to police the minefields. Now, perhaps then we got to an era where you would need off-the-road vehicles to also go to these sites and so on. Now, if we are going to leverage technology in our surveillance system, maybe time has come for us to use like drones, and which will also make it easier for perhaps you have a drone base, and then where they can monitor the field using drones without necessarily having to go there personally. So these are some of the things that can be done, and I believe that maybe when he talks about putting together a mine surveillance task force, then I believe that maybe these are some of the things that would need to be done so as to ensure that it does not just end at the level of policy pronouncement, but indeed we will see effective implementation of those programs. And I can assure you that if this is done, it will certainly have salutary effect on the mining sector, because most of the miners you speak today have problems where either they have their license area invaded by
Thank you very much, Prof.
I think I'll...
Yeah, thank you, Prof. And Prof, I think, by the way, lawyers also don't like illegal miners. They don't pay legal fees. So I'm sure lawyers would fully agree with the minister on the issue of illegal miners. So we want them eradicated as soon as possible, so we can get proper fee paying clients. So moving on, I just want this round of questions to just be, because we're running out of time, just 1 minute each. And what exactly this is that we are assuming that the president has made you, each of the speakers, the minister, just for 1 minute. Tell us in 1 minute, if you had to add to the 7 points of this 7-point agenda, what would be the 8th item you would put? So we'll start with Tim. Tim, you have just been made a minister of solid minerals. What is that 8th item you want to put on this 7-point agenda?
It's difficult to wrap it up so quickly, but I'll try. I would overhaul the entire licensing processes. I would appoint regional consultants just to protect the integrity of the process, to audit the quarterly filings of the exploration license holders somewhat historically. So 2 years from when they've had the licenses, I would like to see what they've done on the ground itself in those 2 years. And you will find that if this is done, it will bring down the quote unquote 7,000 active licenses today in the cadastral to less than 200. And when I have those 200 license holders who have actually done things on their properties, I will then sit down with 5 of them, just 5, no more than 5. 5 of them with the strongest management teams, 5 of them that have potentially the most prospective grounds, and I'll assist them in raising funding to de-risk the tenements they hold, advance it further to the point where it becomes investable for the bigger mining companies, just because that's what they need to see before they can come in. And lastly, I would ensure I bring as much as I can security stability to Northwest, Northeast, and North Central Nigeria, because, guys, that part of the country is where I believe hosts our most economic mineralization in the country. Don't tell anybody I told you so. So that's what I'll do.
Thank you very much. I think maybe the SBL administration should forward this to the president. I think the president needs to hear what you just said. Thank you so much. I mean, that was for 1 minute, that was really powerfully packed. So we move on to the next Honorable Minister of Steel, Amanda. Honorable Minister, your 1 minute starts now. Honorable Minister, we can't hear you. Unmute your mic, Honorable Minister. Okay, Amanda, seems we've lost. Okay, wait. We can't hear you yet, Amanda.
So as Honorable Minister, I will gather to overhaul the mining policy, which was developed in 2011. It should have been, 2009. It should have been developed before the Mining Act in 2007. The purpose is to ensure that it aligns our mining policies and frameworks with the African Mining Vision, which is the policy framework adopted by the African Union, state of government, heads of government for Africa. This is to ensure that mining is done in a way that it contributes to our development. It spins off a multitude of industries on the downstream and on the upstream, or backward linkages and forward linkages. So if you look at Finland or Sweden, they have an industry that is not even so much built on their exploration industry, but they're the largest producers of mining technologies, equipment, and services. Then on the other hand, I will also be pushing for developing Nigeria as an exploration investment destination and building a junior mining sector, so that we have junior mining companies that are similar to the Owandos and the Saharas and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. That was a power packed. You can now off your mic. And then we move on to our last Honorable Minister, Honorable Minister Prof, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Officer of the Federal Republic. Your 1 minute starts now, sir.
Thank you. If I'm appointed a minister and I'm to add to this list, one thing I would like us to focus on will be to establish an independent regulator for the mining industry. This is important for purpose of ensuring that the sector is properly governed and regulated. So improved governance is one of the President's priority areas. So in line with that, I would advocate strongly for an independent regulator to be established for the mining industry. This would take off from the technical departments in the Ministry of Mines of Solid Minerals that have regulatory powers. We'll pull all of them together into a commission where they will be able to be resourced and adequately capacitated to be able to serve as effective technical and economic regulators for the mining sector. We can see example in the oil and gas sector. They have a regulator for the upstream and midstream sector, and that is providing some enforcement and regulation of the sector in the oil and gas. So we do not have a sector. So if we have an independent regulator in the form of a minerals mining commission, for instance, I believe very strongly that it will strengthen their hand and those working there to be able to properly regulate the sector and provide the appropriate governance needed to ensure that the sector progresses. So yes, independent regulator in the form of a commission will be the one addition I would like to put to this 7-point agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. So for sake of time, we would quickly jump to the audience questions. We already have quite a number of questions in the Q&A box. But just to remind the attendees, the administrator has just posted a link to get your CPD points. So please click on that link, fill the form, and you get your CPD points for attending this session. And I also want to let the attendees know, before we wrap up, Prof is still going to give us some tips about some of the opportunities that lie for lawyers in this area. But I want us to get through the audience questions, and then we'll still have our panel speakers give us their last thoughts before we round up. The first question is from an anonymous attendee, even though the question is not addressed to any speaker, but I can see, Tim, that your name is written all over this question. So the anonymous attendee is asking, Tim, what type of data is regarded as big data in the mining industry?
You want to advance your project to the feasibility stage, which means you've understood those things I mentioned at the start of the discussion. You've understood your geology. You've understood your metallurgy. What's the composition of your ore? You know what your grades look like. You know what your crest sections are. You know what your geometries are. You know what your tonnages are. You have to de-risk these things. You have to be able to describe your project with numbers. It's not just because I have a great land and I know it's rich. There's nothing like that in mining. You have to actually do the work and drill this resource, drill it out. It's very expensive, it's time consuming, and it requires a lot of expertise. And that is what you know as big data, because you have to be able to say, I know the size of my resource at this grade, and I know what is convertible to become a reserve that is mineable, that is economic. So that is what we call big data. And it does cost a lot of money. But at the end of that tunnel is a lot of light if you can get there. So that is
Thank you very much. I remember the first time I ever, in a mining transaction, came across the amount of money it takes just to get that data together and understand what the reserves hold. I was quite astounded. Imagine putting all that money in and you kind of are going in blind to an extent. So I think I understand why operators are always anxious to have some data before they pour money into any title, into any title.
You have to, Max, because it's what saves you from losing $100 million. So you spend the 5 to 10 to not lose $100 million. That you can build a mine. The good thing is, though, all across the value chain is a need for the lawyers. So
thank you for the thumbs up for the lawyers. We love you for that. In fact, we have already converted your exploration license to a mining title, a 99-year mining title. So we are going to have you back over and over again. So the next question is something Prof had already touched on, but Prof, perhaps you want to add some more context. Joel Odile asked, what role can artisanal miners play in developing the mining industry in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much. Artisanal mining, Nigerian mining space would say that much of the mining takes place within our jurisdiction is done by artisanal miners, which means they are contributing a lot in that regard. But in truth, in many jurisdictions, it's actually the artisanal miners that oftentimes discover the existence of ore bodies that other junior and perhaps major players begin to come. So they're like scavengers. They're the ones that go around looking and they discover that this is here, and then sometimes this calls for more exploration before you can begin to determine the exact nature of deposits in that place. So they have that foundational pivotal role, if you like, to play. They also provide some level of low-level manpower, because they have been doing some of these things at rudimentary level. So by the time the juniors come in and so on, they can get ready manpower to do some of those things that they want to do. So they do have a contribution. And in Nigeria particularly, artisanal miners have been responsible for much of the mining that has taken place in this country. So they have a big role to play. Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof. So Amanda, the next question is from Olufemi Folorunsho, and it touches on something that I know, has also been an interesting discussion. So his question specifically, is it the government that should be responsible for the data collection of mineral resources within jurisdiction? And if yes, what is government doing? Because that seems to be the bedrock in the development of the mining sector in Nigeria. So why this question is important is that, is it possible for government to outsource data gathering, and for private enterprise to actually do some of the data, that big data, and then now have the right to sell that data to ultimate operators? Is that a feasible approach to data, developing data for the sector?
Okay, so the norm is for the government to produce what is called pre-competitive data. Just enough information, sufficient information that investors can then, take on and continue the process. And that includes airborne geophysics and geochemical studies and airborne and geophysics and airborne geophysics and geochemical studies. So what the government has done so far is they've done airborne surveys up to 50 meters, which is commendable. They haven't done it around the country. They have 100% coverage around the country, but that has not been sufficient. So they've done this. But what's more important is that investors have access to that information. It's supposed to be, it's a public good, and it shouldn't be restricted. There's a just data center which is at the NGSA, but whether investors can have that access to that data is another. So it's a huge governance issue in several African countries, and the African countries, particularly in West Africa, that are attracting investors are those that make this information available. It's not enough to take the investor to the bank, but it's enough to stir the interest of the investor. And it should really be done as part of efforts of the government to develop the exploration industry within that country, or within Nigeria in this case. I hear you, Max. You're.
Oh, thank you. Apologies. Thank you very much for that. I was just saying that even in the oil and gas, I think we see that kind of approach as well, where government does some of the rudimentary data collection, and then private parties come in and are able to take that further and really get more data available. So now we have 3 questions which are kind of related. And Prof, I'll be sending this triple decker right your way. So the first question, of course, is by our immediate past chair of the mining committee, Mr. Ola Alukolaro, managing partner of Advocate. And at some point, we'll let him just say hi to us as well. Let's hear his rich baritone. Ever since he left office, we have not had the privilege of hearing that rich baritone. So his question is, in terms of setting up mine police, do we have enough personnel and funds to equip such outfits for all mining sites? Would it not be better for states to equip and police illegal mining? This brings forth the issue of state police again. And Abubakar Suleiman now asked, what efforts are being made to amend the Mining Act to remove it from the exclusive list? We have seen it happen to power. So it's, so why should it not happen to mining as well? And then lastly, Ahmad Bello says, Prof. Akpe, is it possible to prevent totally illegal mining in Nigeria? So Prof, I want you to just wrap up all these 3 questions in 1 minute, please, and just give us, I know it's a huge constitutional debate, but that is why you are a prof. You can do it in 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you. We may not have enough police to patrol all the mine sites across the country. And that is why I was saying that perhaps part of the task force on surveillance, part of their what they will be doing will be to leverage technology. And where you need 10,000 policemen to do a job, 1 or 2 drones perhaps would be able to do that. So if we leverage technology, I believe it's possible for us to police the mine sites without necessarily having a physical presence of policemen around the mining site. I don't know if it's possible to eliminate illegal mining completely. That would depend on the extent of enforcement of our laws and how effective that is. But the important thing for me is to ensure that if you make illegal mining a high-risk venture, then people will be scared, will think twice before engaging it. Once it's not a high-risk venture, then everybody can just, there's no incentive to formalize your activities. There's no incentive to go take license if you can actually operate illegally without any constraint. So it's how effective that we are in making it a high-risk venture that will prevent the practice going forward. Now, as to whether mining should remain on the exclusive list or not, it's another debate altogether. We will have to deal with our constitution, we'll have to deal with our mining law as it is. I personally have my own views as to whether indeed we should have it on the exclusive list or on the concurrent list, as the case may be. Maybe that is not something that we can exhaustively deal with, but the important thing for us to note is that Nigeria operates a state mineral rights system. So the minerals and the ownership and control of the minerals still rests with the state as it is now. So until we have a constitutional change, maybe that's where we go to go. But the truth of the matter is that if you look at it around the world, most jurisdictions around the world operate the state mineral rights system. That means, therefore, that perhaps having it by the state is perhaps the best way to go at the moment. Whether that state should also include the subnationals, as is being agitated, is another thing that we'll have to look at it. But for now, I think those are some of the views I would like to share with regard to that.
Thank you very much, Prof. We are out of time, but before we wrap up, the immediate past chair of the Mining Law Committee, Mr. Ola Alukolaro, is on the call. We just wanted to say hi. I mean, since he left office, he's gone on vacation. We have not heard his voice. Yeah, we have not heard his voice. We have not seen his face. So, Mr. Ola Alukolaro, if you could just say hi to us in 30 seconds before the vice chair of the committee, Laura Annie, wraps us up with a vote of thanks. Mr. Ola Alukolaro, can you hear me?
Thank you very much, Max.
We can't see your face yet, Chair. We also want to see your face.
Thank you very much, Max. And good evening, everybody. Great conversation all around. Excellent debate. Well done, everyone.
Thank you very much, sir. Good to see you again. So we just call on the vice chair of the Mining Law Committee.
And Max, you were asking.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Prof. Yes, please.
Yeah, you were
Prof.
saying that if there are opportunities for lawyers in the sector, And
Yeah,
I said yes, a lot of work
yes,
for
please, Prof.
going forward. From incorporating companies that are interested in mining to going through the licensing procedure to negotiating community development agreements, and of all areas that our colleagues can find some work to do. And when it comes to mineral development, there are a host of agreements there that lawyers, that the miners will need the help of lawyers to be able to navigate through. So yes, there's a lot of work across the mining value chain for our colleagues, and I ask them to take interest in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And just to let our members know, the committee usually organizes these very enriching master classes and training sessions. We will do one soon. We had one last year. We soon will do one. So I'll just encourage you, join the mining law committee, and also monitor your emails from the SBL. Would let you know when we are going to have that training. So some of the things Prof has mentioned, there's a new regulation on community development agreements. We'll definitely have a master class to break that down and really train on the rudiments, not a short session like we've had today. So please, can I call on the Vice Chair of the committee, Laura Annie, to wrap us up with a vote of thanks. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Max. Yes, I'm going to crave your indulgence to have my camera off because I have been battling with network where I am. So to have a very smooth thanks, I'm going to ask to have my camera off. I do apologize. On behalf of the chairman of the NBA-SBL, Dr. Adefulu Adeoye, and on behalf of the Mining Law Committee, I would like to express my profound gratitude to the very experienced and eminent speakers who have spoken today. Professor Peter Akwe, SAN, OFR, we highly appreciate you for your generous contributions. Mr. Tim Tokun and Amanda Luman-Fise, you'll agree with me that they've all been exceptionally fantastic. And of course, to our audience, we've had about 106 participants. That is a lot. You're taking your time, to spend time and learn about the mining industry. It shows that there's a lot of interest in the sector. So we really appreciate your time. And I just want to add something, a little bit of an addendum, just to say a little bit my thoughts generally. I think the reality is that the mining industry all over the world is facing very complex challenges. Africa, Nigeria is no exception, right? So we're talking about environmental and climate pressures, geopolitics, technological changes, skills shortages, supply chain risk, amongst others. So these challenges are a priority for the long-term sustainability of the mining sector. So what countries are doing now is that they are ready for change. The experienced mining destinations are ready for change. They're adapting to change. So I think Nigeria, using the word of the chairman of the committee, he mentioned that I agree with him. He said the mining sector is always going through a new dawn, and it's true. So, and one thing I picked from the discussions is that we need to have a strategy and frameworks for us to achieve the transformation agenda, so we can really achieve that new dawn. So, on behalf of and finally, I would like to remind us that next week, end of November, we're having another session, but not the Mining Law Committee, is the Mergers, Acquisition and Corporate Reorganizations Committee. And they're having something titled Value Creation in a Volatile Deal Environment. So please do well to attend. It's also going to be as fantastic. It's 30th November and it's 3 p.m. So thank you very much and God bless you and have a beautiful weekend ahead. Thank you, Max. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura, for that very good wrap up. So with that, we've come to the end of this session. We apologize that we took 3 additional minutes of your time, but I hope you found it well worth it. We thank all the speakers again. And of course, Mr. Tim, like we told you, we already have a mining release on you. So you're ready. We're going to call upon you soon to join again one of our activities so we could drill some of your knowledge and exploit a lot more of your vast experience in this field. So thank you all very much. Please fill the CPD, the link for the CPD points so you can get your CPD points, and stay tuned and watch out for the training that will be put together very soon by the Mining Law Committee. It promises to be very beneficial. And of course, Prof would have time to elaborate more on some of the opportunities for lawyers, which he just had to touch very briefly for want of time. So thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon. Of course, see you next week at the Business Law Weekly, the value creation in the volatile deal environment, like the Vice Chair said, also promises to be very enlightening, and also what your launch next week, Thursday, 30th of November. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the week, a great weekend, and see you next week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Max. Thank you.